Meeting started. So welcome everyone and good morning. I would like to welcome you to the beautiful Athena Hotel in the gorgeous city of Bangkok. We have a full 3 days planned for you of fantastic presentations, activities, refreshers, drinks, food, coffee. We're going to refresh you with coffee as much as we possibly can. So welcome to the 11th TOPS FSN Knowledge Sharing Meeting, Food Security Resilience at the Intersection of Development and Emergency. My name is Maciej Chmielewski. I will be the co-facilitator for this year's meeting along with Sheila Jackson, who is a Senior Knowledge Management Specialist for the TOPS program. Over the next 3 days, everyone in this room will be coming together to share, discuss, and hopefully adopt some new ideas that will help you and your teams in your current and future activities. We would also like to acknowledge the folks that are listening to this opening session online. We are live streaming and recording this session along with all the plenary sessions today and during the next couple of days. So on every single day when we have a plenary, we will be live streaming it, and those recordings will be available to you and your colleagues on the FSN Network website. We wish you were all here, but I understand that some people couldn't make it to Bangkok because there's other pressing needs. This year's meeting will focus on the Asia region as a whole, and we are very privileged to convene here in the beautiful city of Bangkok. In the room, we have chiefs of parties, program specialists, donor representatives, and a multitude of development and response practitioners that amount to a wealth of knowledge that cannot be tapped on a daily basis. And this is actually something that was expressed multiple times by various different individuals, how many people we have in this room that are from senior positions within the different projects and different activities in the field. So this is a very special meeting this year where everyone is going to be in the same room, so we hope you take advantage of that and get to know each other really well and make some really good contacts. To elaborate on this year's message and to further welcome you, I would like to introduce Mark Fritzer. Mark has been leading the TOPS program from the outset and is based at Save the Children. While also at Save the Children, he was a country director for Iraq, Mozambique, and Indonesia, and has served as the chief of party for the global Save the Children tsunami response in Aceh, Indonesia. Mark has been instrumental in leading the TOPS program to what it is today, a cornerstone in USAID's Food for Peace base and technical service delivery. Please help me welcome Mark to the podium.
Thank you, Maciej. And just to let you know, there will be an exam later as to how to spell his name. So, anyway, thank you very much, and welcome to all of you. My name is Mark Fritzler, as Maciej said, and I am the director of the TOPS Bridge program. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the TOPS FSN Network 11th Knowledge Sharing Meeting, and we've all come here to explore the challenges of food security and resilience at the intersection of emergencies and development, and to learn and share knowledge among ourselves to help us respond more effectively to these challenges. For those who may not know, just a quick thumbnail, the TOPS program began in 2010 with a grant from USAID's Office of Food for Peace to the TOPS Consortium. Thank you, Food for Peace. The consortium is comprised of the award leader, that's Save the Children, and the consortium members of the core group, Food for the Hungry, Mercy Corps, and Tango International, all of which provided members to the TOPS team, work together. The objectives of the TOPS program were simple, basically to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of U.S. government-supported food security activities and to strengthen the skills and abilities of the implementing partners to deliver those services. That's all of us. The TOPS program aimed to create learning spaces where implementing partners and donors could meet as peers and learn and share from one another. From this concept, the FSN Network was born. The FSN Network was designed to be a constellation of activities that would knit together the members of the larger Food Security Committee into a shared community of practice. To do this, TOPS staff created an open, collaborative, and non-competitive atmosphere in which all food security actors are welcome to participate and to contribute. Some of the better-known components of the FSN Network are the interactive website that's become such a crucial resource for most of us, the bi-weekly newsletter, countless learning events over the past almost 8 years now, and these knowledge-sharing meetings. The purpose of these knowledge-sharing meetings were to bring together members of the food security and implementing community from across the spectrum of USAID and Food for Peace funded development activities, and more recently emergency activities, to share knowledge and learn new and improved practices to strengthen our own programs. The TOPS FSA network has conducted KSMs, or knowledge sharing meetings, in 11 locations, including Baltimore, a remote location, Washington, D.C., Mozambique, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Dhaka, and well, I already said Bangladesh, didn't I? And now Bangkok. I think I can safely say that at this point that Food for Peace and the implementing partners community are committed to continue these valuable learning events or evolving versions of them in the future. The participants at all these events have been and are you, the implementers and the donors who work to help vulnerable populations recover from humanitarian crises and build stronger, more resilient lives for themselves and their families and communities. And I can't say that right now without thinking, as we all are, of the tragic earthquake and tsunami that just hit Sulawesi, and the news that keeps coming out of that is just horrifying. Many of us have had experience in previous events similar to that, like the Aceh tsunami that affected Indonesia and the surrounding countries. And so our thoughts are all with these people, and in addition to which, the community of implementing communities represented by many of us here are already rushing to provide assistance. That includes the international humanitarian organizations, PVOs, UN agencies, and more. Those of us who have seen the effects of such disasters know firsthand just how devastating they are and how important it is to provide rapid humanitarian assistance as well as contribute to the recovery to build back better. We will hear later this morning if there is more information that comes, but I'm sure that the news will continue to come out of that area, and it's a terrible situation. You will experience many exciting sessions over the next 3 days, from which you will learn much that will be new to you, and you will have had the opportunity to share your own experiences and knowledge with others. And so at this point, I'd like to really call your attention to and highlight our wrap-up session at the afternoon of the third day, on Thursday from 3:30 to 5, and where we all work together to figure out how we're going to take it all home. Together we'll reflect upon what we have learned and identify what we can take forward as individuals and as a community. We'll continue our direct engagement with our colleagues in USAID, sitting in the audience as well, many of them, cement relationships with our fellow implementing partner colleagues, and commit to continue our communication and collaboration. And of course, not least of all, we're going to have some fun and some prizes. And Sheila is always pretty creative when it comes to the prizes. And now it's my pleasure to actually have us to give a word from our sponsor. And I'm honored at this time to introduce Brian Bacon, Deputy Director for the Office of Food for Peace, Bureau of Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance at USAID. Brian is an international development professional with more than 20 years of experience supporting development and humanitarian initiatives worldwide. Brian's 15 years with USAID have included long-term assignments in Kenya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Ghana, and Washington, D.C., with assignments at the National Security Council and the Department of Defense. Earlier, Brian led the Office of Food for Peace's Global Division and was responsible for oversight of the Asia, Middle East, and Latin America food assistance portfolios. In addition to positions at USAID, Brian served with the Peace Corps in Togo. How many of us have been in the Peace Corps? I tell you, we're a secret cabal within the heart of all this activity. But in any case, many of you have served not only just the Peace Corps, but also with many voluntary organizations and associations. So it does provide, I think, one of the answers you give to people who say out of college, how do I get into the national development support world? And one way is to volunteer. He also has worked for other international NGOs, United Nations missions in Cambodia and Rwanda, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He holds a Master's of International Public Health from Tulane University with a focus on nutrition and food security, a Master's of Business Administration from the Thunderbird School of Global Management. That's in Phoenix, right? Okay. And is a graduate of the National Security Executive Leadership Seminar. So it's my pleasure to welcome Brian Bacon.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's really good to be here with you and to kick off this 3-day event. I know, as Mark highlighted, many of you have come from afar. I hope your journeys were relatively painless and smooth, and that I'm sure you're all caught up on your sleep at this point. When the Office of Food for Peace established TOPS in 2010, we did so with the recognition that our partners would have the best chance for success in undertaking the challenges before them if there were opportunities in fora for sharing experience and for broad-based collaboration amongst colleagues. In the 8 years since the program started, TOPS has made a major contribution to achieving this objective by serving as a locus for Food for Peace partners to share, to learn, and to build deeper knowledge base for food assistance and food security programming. Some of the best examples of this contribution have emerged from these FSN network knowledge sharing meetings. In 2011, USAID staff and our implementing partners, since 2011, USAID staff and our implementing partners have met this way 11 times, including in Washington and multiple other venues, primarily in Africa. This is the first meeting of its kind in Asia, and I'd say it's about time. In parallel with supporting the wider food security community, these events also offer an important opportunity for USAID's Food for Peace team and USAID more generally. Your expertise, experience-based knowledge, and candid perspectives challenge us to help find new ways and better paths forward in our programs and how we use our resources. A couple examples of how these consultations have led directly to Food for Peace adopting new and improved approaches include one, our refine and implement approach, and another example would be the more deliberate incorporation of theories of change and adaptive management, which are now carried out in all of our non-emergency food assistance activities. I'm not changing the slides, am I? No, pressing buttons here. This is the first regional knowledge sharing meeting that I've been able to attend in person, and I'm thrilled that Mark and his TOPS team and my Food for Peace colleagues working closely with TOPS were able to move mountains to enable us all to be here and together in Thailand over these 3 days. On a personal note, and at risk of dating myself, more than a couple decades ago, on a holiday break from studies as an exchange student at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, I had a chance to first visit Thailand. And needless to say, on my return, a few things have changed since that visit, at least here in Bangkok. What hasn't changed is the warmth and the hospitality of our Thai hosts. And I can already see that we will be very well cared for here at the Athene Hotel. Did everybody experience the breakfast buffet yet? Nice. I'd like to make a few comments about the guiding theme for our meeting, food security resilience at the intersection of development and emergency. Interestingly, while resilience as an explicit concept or objective emerged as a USAID priority in the wake of large-scale humanitarian emergencies in the Horn of Africa and Sahel in 2011-2012, you, the Food for Peace implementing partners, had already laid a significant conceptual and operational foundation for this more recent agency conversation. This foundation stems from decades of your extraordinary work supporting the most vulnerable, including those in areas of recurrent crisis. Back in 2012, TOPS worked with Food for Peace and USAID more broadly to convene a large meeting much like this. It brought together multiple USAID bureaus, mission staff, implementing partners, national government partners, and researchers to discuss the challenges of linking emergency and non-emergency funding and programming to best meet the needs of crisis-affected populations. Resilience was the theme of that conference. The discussions that day helped to set the stage for years of subsequent work at USAID directed at strengthening the resilience of the world's most vulnerable through better policies, more effective programming, and more nuanced measurement efforts. Highlighting the importance of building resilience in Asia, and thus hopefully reducing the need for humanitarian assistance, a couple sets of numbers. In our fiscal year 2018, Food for Peace provided $225 million in emergency food assistance. That's in-kind food, cash, vouchers, etc. In Asia, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Burma, and the Philippines. For comparison, in fiscal year 2016, we provided about half of that, $110 million. And that included the disaster response in Fiji and Papua New Guinea. So resilience has never been more relevant to USAID and certainly for us in our programming in the Asia region. And just to highlight those countries where we have contributed significant funding, we certainly anticipate, if asked, robust response in response to the tragedy in Sulawesi, and many thanks to your organizations at the front line of that response already to date. I believe the President called you out yesterday and offered thanks to the Americans already serving in that response. So while called a variety of things to a variety of people, rightly so, resilience as a concept is increasingly cemented into USAID's policies and programs as a priority. This is reflected by what is emerging through the agency's recent ongoing reorganization, including within the anticipated Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance and Bureau for Resilience and Food Security. Many, many thanks to TOPS and to you all for continuing to help in evolving our thinking and approaches on this concept, both conceptually and institutionally in the context of this reorganization. And spoiler alert, my colleagues Elizabeth, Joan, and I will shed a bit more light on the agency reorganization in Thursday's plenary session. It certainly will be gripping. With that, I'd like to remind people that change is coming to TOPS. Our greatly valued TOPS program and partnership ends in January of 2019. But fear not, Food for Peace is planning to soon award a follow-on mechanism called the Implementer-Led Design, Evidence, Analysis, and Learning Mechanism, otherwise known as IDEAL. IDEAL will build on the significant impact of TOPS by improving the quality of Food for Peace programming, design, and implementation, carrying the community forward with a focus on Food for Peace's evolving priorities. We're planning a period of overlap where these two mechanisms will carry out a handover of knowledge, resources, and lessons learned, and continue to support our Food for Peace implementing community without missing a beat, or at least I'm promised we won't miss a beat. So stay tuned for an announcement in the coming weeks. In closing, as this is the first meeting of its kind for us in Asia, the meeting coincides with another Food for Peace landmark, the arrival of our first regional Food for Peace officer for Asia, Mike McFarland. I saw Mike come in. Mike, you want to raise your hand? We're really looking forward to having Mike based here at USAID's regional mission in Bangkok, supporting our Food for Peace colleagues and programs throughout Asia. So if you have an opportunity to introduce yourself to Mike over the next days, please do. With that, enjoy the next days and for being here, and in particular for all that you do to support Food for Peace programs and the people in need in Asia. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Brian. And I would also just like to echo some of the great work that the TOPS team has been doing, and I'm really confident that the new IDEAL team will also build on those successes and do great work. So now it is my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Some of you in the room might know this man as a fellow colleague in the field, and some of you might be getting to know him for the very first time. Allow me to introduce Jerry Bisson, who is currently serving as the USAID Mission Director in Islamabad, Pakistan. Pakistan, being USAID's largest assistance portfolio, comes with a long list of challenges, untapped opportunities, and promising practices. In today's keynote, Jerry will share some of those experiences with you today. For more than 30 years as a senior foreign service officer, Jerry has built and motivated teams dedicated to improving the lives of people in Afghanistan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Eurasia. He holds the rank of Minister Counsel in the Senior Foreign Service. Jerry has been awarded the State Department's Herbert Salazar Award for Excellence in International Economic Performance, USAID's Molly Cook's Environmental Award, and numerous superior and meritorious honor awards. After Jerry's speech, we will be taking questions. Please remember to wait for the microphones to get to you so everyone in the room and online can hear your questions. In planning for today's keynote, Jerry thanked TOPS for conducting a phone call at a civilized hour of 4:30 p.m. in Islamabad time, which was for me 10:30 p.m. in Reykjavik, where I live, and 6:30 a.m. in DC time. So at the end of the day, we are all finally happy that we are all in the same room together at the same time zone to deliver this plenary. Please join me in welcoming Jerry to the podium to deliver our keynote address.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm your morning entertainment, okay? So this is what you get. And I'm not going to bore you with death by PowerPoint. I'm going to bore you with some stories. So I want to begin with recognizing Brian Bacon, the Deputy Director of Office for Food for Peace, and Mark Fritzer from Save the Children. Distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to have been invited by the TOPS Food Security and Nutrition Network to share my experiences working with food security resilience programs in Asia. However, first, I would like to acknowledge the terrible disaster that took place in Sulawesi, Indonesia. The earthquake and tsunami have killed possibly over 1,000 people, destroyed homes, buildings, roads, and bridges. It will take years to rebuild this infrastructure. But this is an opportunity to help the Indonesian people and the government rebuild better, including improving the building codes to incorporate earthquake-resistant standards, as well as helping them prepare for future disasters. USAID has received the request for assistance, and we are responding. More than 800 million people across the globe will go hungry tonight. They'll go to bed hungry, and most of them are smallholder farmers who depend upon agriculture to make a living and to feed their families. Despite an explosion of growth in urban slums over the last decade, nearly 75% of the poor people still live in rural areas. And that's why growth in the agriculture sector has been at least twice as effective in reducing poverty as growth in other sectors. So investing in these smallholder farmers and vulnerable communities is now more important than ever. A spike in world food prices in 2008 hurt economies across the world and led to riots in over 30 countries. The global population is expected to reach 9 billion by the year 2050. And to feed all these people, the world will not only have to double its current food production, but will have to find a way to do it using less water and less land. Early in 2017, the Famine Early Warning Systems Network estimated that an unprecedented 70 million people across 45 countries would need emergency food assistance due to persistent conflict, severe drought, and economic instability. According to a United Nations report, for the first time in over a decade, global hunger increased last year, rising to 821 million people. And violent conflict, climate-related shocks are the primary causes of this alarming trend, which has carried over into 2008 with an estimated 78 million people in need of emergency food assistance. In fiscal year 2017, the USAID Office of Food for Peace helped approximately 70 million people in 53 countries. The vast majority of these people, roughly 64 million, received emergency food and nutrition assistance, and approximately 64 million received this emergency food assistance And then 6 million of them benefited from development assistance that helps populations strengthen the resilience to recurrent emergencies. Food for Peace provides assistance to those who need it most, whether they are internally displaced people, refugees, or other vulnerable families. In 2017, Food for Peace supported food-insecure refugee populations worldwide, including the 5 million refugees who fled the Syrian crisis and the 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. Recurrent humanitarian emergencies are costly in terms of lost lives and livelihoods. A 2013 UK study estimates that over the long term, every dollar invested in building the resilience of people and places that are subject to recurrent emergencies will result in about $3 in reduced humanitarian spending. Recognizing that repeatedly responding to emergencies will neither end hunger nor increase long-term food security, USAID resilience programs play a valuable role in bridging the gap between humanitarian and development assistance by strengthening systems and planning mechanisms that allow individuals and communities to forecast, prevent, and withstand and recover from future emergencies. And this lays the foundation for stable, inclusive growth. Ultimately, USAID promotes a path to self-reliance for partner countries, reducing the need for future assistance. Alleviating global hunger is also critical to U.S. national security. Where hunger persists, instability grows. By supporting the world's most vulnerable, USAID is building a more stable world and ensuring that people have the opportunity to lead healthy and productive lives. Now, I'd like to share with you some of my work in food security and nutrition. And throughout my career in international development, first with the Peace Corps, and I was pleased to see at least a third of the room were former volunteers, and now with USAID, I've been given the unique opportunity to promote food security and resilience. I worked on a wide range of agroforestry projects in the Philippines and Indonesia, and these are aimed at helping farmers increase their income and produce diverse, high-value agricultural crops, such as high-yield mango trees, intercrop with short-term cash crops like tomatoes. And I help communities expand the use of backyard gardens to grow nutritious food, in particular the malunggay tree, the leaves of which contain high amounts of vital micronutrients. I also develop programs to reduce overfishing in Southeast Asia that affect highly vulnerable communities living in the coastal areas. Overfishing threatens the food security of millions of people living in coastal areas. These are people who depend upon fish for their protein. However, cost-effective approaches such as fish stock assessments, use of appropriate fishing gear, and closed seasons can allow depleted wild fish stocks to rebound. Managing wild fish stocks is far more efficient, equitable, and economically viable than investing in aquaculture. For the last year, I have led USAID Pakistan, and this includes efforts to increase the resilience of extremely vulnerable communities living in the remote northwest corner of Pakistan. And I'd like to talk about this story. The federally administered tribal areas, it's also known as FATA, is located along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. And it's the epicenter of the operations of some of the world's most violent extremist organizations. And this region also has some of Pakistan's most pervasive development challenges, in particular population displacement and extreme poverty. The literacy rate among women is 8%. So out of 100 women, only 8 women can read and write. 56% of the school-aged children are enrolled, but of those school-aged children, 73% will drop out. Approximately 97% of the population is rural, there's limited electricity, there is high child mortality, and 70% of the population live below the poverty line. The merger this year between the FATA area and the neighboring province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa represents both governance opportunities and challenges. Between 2008 and 2014, the Pakistan government carried out military operations in the FATA aimed at dismantling various extremist groups, and this led to significant population displacements. Since 2008, more than 5 million women, men, girls, and boys have fled their homes to escape violence. Since 2009, the World Food Program, with 800 million from USAID, has been providing daily food and nutrition assistance to more than 2 million displaced people living along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Since 2013, the government of Pakistan has donated 735,000 tons of wheat, which is valued at about 280 million, to this emergency. USAID, as the largest donor, has contributed 121 million. This partnership has helped extend food assistance to over 2 million internally displaced people. In 2015, the Pakistan government and the military implemented a plan to facilitate the return of all internally displaced people to their homes in FATA. Yet for many, their homes no longer existed, nor did the infrastructure that could support their livelihoods. In some areas, up to 80% of the houses, of the schools, health facilities, roads, and water supply systems have been damaged. Despite cash grants given by the government, 3 in 4 people still do not have enough money to buy food. In some communities, returnees report they don't have water. Those displaced have returned. They face considerable difficulties restarting agricultural-based livelihoods due to the heavy damage to irrigation infrastructure, reduced livelihood stocks, and changes to the economy, particularly after the introduction of strict border controls with Afghanistan. USAID recently completed our new 5-year strategy, and building the resilience of returnee populations living along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border is a key component of this strategy. After years of displacement, the coping mechanisms of these returnee populations have been severely eroded. In response, USAID is working with partners to design resilience and food security programs for FATA, which also help to address the push factors that extremist groups use to exploit for recruitment. And this is the lack of economic opportunity, the unresponsive, inequitable, and ineffective government services. In response, USAID will support activities that build the provincial government's capacity to deliver basic services for the FATA returnees. This includes water, health, education, and governance. And we'll be working to increase productivity in the agricultural and livestock sectors, and we'll support policy and governance reforms. The need to rebuild the people's livelihoods is critical to maintaining stability, not only in FATA, but in the greater South Asia region. The USAID-supported World Food Program, Food for Assets, is a good example of our resilience work in FATA. Former IDPs were chosen to participate in the rehabilitation of basic community infrastructure, or livelihoods, in their communities of origin in FATA. So around 12,000 structural activities have been completed along the Afghan-Pakistan border, and this includes rehabilitating irrigation canals, farm-to-market roads, protection walls, and check dams. Over 30% of the households under the Food for Assets programs have reported improved agriculture production, increased income and livelihoods, and better access to basic facilities. And about 80% of the households assisted reported improved preparedness for future emergencies. UNICEF nutrition programs for severely malnourished returnees were layered with FAO and World Food Program in the same communities. And this provided a comprehensive approach to increase people's overall resilience to a wide range of health and food security related shocks. The last nutrition survey in this area in 2011 showed an alarming nutrition situation. About 58% of the children in FATA are stunted. This indicates long-term negative consequences of reduced mental development and economic productivity. Reducing malnutrition is crucial to strengthen resilience because well-nourished individuals are healthier, they can work harder, have greater physical reserves. Households that are nutrition secure are thus better able to withstand and endure longer and recover more quickly from external shocks. USAID supports nutrition activities across Pakistan, and this provides specialized commodities and increased availability of nutritious foods such as dairy products, meat, and vegetables. USAID is also working to increase the poor families' access to healthcare facilities and raise their awareness on good nutrition practices. And we work very closely with a multi-donor group on nutrition to ensure donor investments are well coordinated. I would like to take a moment to recognize the critical role that our implementing partners, this is you, that you play, this is especially the PVO community and the family of the UN organizations, the work that you do in delivering humanitarian development assistance, and this is often under difficult and dangerous conditions. This event provides a constructive forum for donors and the implementing partners to learn together through a mutual and dynamic learning process. And I look forward to learning more about these best practices. I want to also note that the government and the United Nations and the PVOs and donors, we can't do it alone. Businesses must also step up. They must be able to increase their technology and prevent and manage risk and respond to shocks. The private sector brings unique expertise in market-based solutions and is a vital component to food and agricultural systems that can sustain the results beyond the life of a humanitarian and development assistance. USAID partners with the private sector to mobilize resources in support of food security and nutrition, where there is a strong alignment between the business interests and our development objectives. USAID believes that empowering the private sector, including small-scale producers, to innovate and invest in agricultural value chain development is a pathway to sustainability and allows U.S. government assistance to wind down. The private sector plays a role in producing food supplements that can supply people, particularly children under 5, with the right nutritional components to foster physical and cognitive growth. The private sector is also a major actor in food fortification. This is considered to be a cost-effective and safe way to address the hidden hunger caused by micronutrient deficiencies. And I want to recognize here the UK's Department for International Development. We work with the UK quite closely, and we've been partnering with the private sector to fortify wheat flour, ghee, and oil in Pakistan. Through public-private sector dialogue, this is an opportunity for the private sector to advocate for policies that can increase food production by enabling a better business environment. We've had some success. In Pakistan, we have now market-oriented policies that expand access to improved seed varieties, and that's able to increase the food productivity and supplies for food processing plants. There are many success stories working in Pakistan, but these remote and dangerous regions such as FATA, they also come with challenges. The security situation remains a very significant concern. The occasional resurgence of small-scale military operations in these already hard-hit locations limits the ability of our implementing partners to reach the most vulnerable populations, and it also limits our ability to monitor progress. With an uptick in long-term conflict-related displacements globally, there is an increasing need for USAID to do resilience work in non-permissive environments such as Pakistan, South Sudan, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Mali. And there's little research on resilience program in conflict-prone countries. USAID Pakistan has committed to serve as a learning platform for doing resilience programs in insecure and non-permissive environments. And we've pledged under our new strategy to do a learning platform that is transparent, and we're going to share lessons learned, even our failures. In particular, we think we can learn a lot from things that didn't work well. In conclusion, I'd like to share a recent success story which initially took root during my time as Deputy Mission Director in USAID Afghanistan. From October 2015 to December 2017, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or GAIN, and the USAID, we supported the in-country efforts aimed at creating an enabling environment to increase the availability and access of fortified foods. This was achieved by strengthening fortification regulations and the capacity for monitoring and enforcement. And we put a special focus on the importation of fortified wheat flour and edible oil. When the project started, there was no fortified flour in the market in Afghanistan. Today, 18% of the households consume fortified flour. And Afghanistan also has a high stunting rate. 44% of the children in Afghanistan are stunted. But most importantly, last month, the legislation which GAIN helped develop has been approved and signed by the President. The Afghanistan industry now has 1 year to prepare for implementation. The good news shows that Afghanistan is on a sustainable road to end the hidden hunger. Pursuing partnerships between host country governments, the private sector, and other stakeholders can generate viable approaches to improve food security and nutrition and build robust resilience in some of the most vulnerable communities, including in some dangerous countries. On behalf of USAID, I would like to thank you for the work that you do every day in promoting food security, improved nutrition, and greater resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I think we're all going to be looking forward to hearing more about the learning platform. All right, so we're going to go into a session where we're going to take some questions. So if anyone has any questions for Jerry or even Brian or Mark, please raise your hand, and we have microphones around the room.
I was told this is not a shy crowd.
No? Is there anything online? Adrian? No? Okay. Okay. No questions?
That'd be a question from somebody. USAID, we're the big bad donor. Come on, you got to ask some questions.
Hi, Kyla Gregory, Office of Food for Peace. I'm a WASH and infrastructure advisor, and I wanted to ask a little bit more about the asset programming that's happening in the FATA, and what are some of the lessons learned, both positive and some of the failures, if you would, particularly around maybe construction quality and kind of monitoring of those activities.
Can somebody from World Food Program respond to that, or from anyone else have the answer? If not, we'll have to get back to you on that. Abdul, you want to answer? Abdul Rahman is the USAID Pakistan colleague here who actually knows stuff. So please listen to Abdul.
So Abdul, the microphones are behind you.
You talked about Food for Assets program, and can you please repeat the question, because I was reading something else. Sorry for that.
No problem. My name's Kyla Gregory. I'm an infrastructure and WASH advisor in Food for Peace, and I wanted to inquire a bit more about the asset programming in the FATA of Pakistan, particularly in conflict and non-permissive environments. Sort of what's been your findings, your positive, your negative, your lessons learned around construction quality and monitoring and kind of maintenance supervision of those more long-term investments?
Okay, I will start from your last piece of the question. That's monitoring. As Jerry mentioned in his keynote address, it's difficult at the moment, but we are, like, you know, that WFP is using their strategic framework, and it's a global framework for their M&E programs, and we as a USAID and Office of Food for Peace, we are heavily relying on that. But at the same time, I think WFP and USAID Pakistan, we are using third-party monitors as well. So the idea is that in non-permissive environment, and people were displaced like 6-7 years ago. So when they go back, there were no basic services available. So we want to make sure that at least that they have some kind of economic opportunity, and the longer term objective is that people have that opportunity so that they don't go to the extremist. Just a little bit history about the FATA. In past, people used to have a illegal, or you can say legal, business with Afghanistan because that was the trade route. Now that border is closed. So people would have very limited opportunities. So that's how this Food for Assets program started, and to make sure that people have some kind of economic opportunity. Lesson learned is that because it's a fairly new program and people started returning back in early 2015, and as Jerry mentioned in his address, more or less 2 million people have gone back. So it's an uphill task, and partners are working together. Next challenge for the whole implementing community in FATA is because the government of Pakistan has a requirement for the international NGOs community to have registered with the government of Pakistan system. Most of the NGOs are facing problem of registration and NOCs, no objection certificate, to implement the program. But the situation is changing now. We have a new government, and sooner that government might have an enabling environment for the international community, and UN has already presence in the area. I hope I did answer, but in terms of what went well, one example is that WFP is a pioneer on the cash-based transfers program in one of the non-permissive environments. That's called KSAsia18. That's also it's part of the FATA, and it's on the Afghanistan border. I think the idea was that USAID along with UK aid, we give cash to WFP so that they could create and rehabilitate the irrigation channels in KSAsia18, and at the same time rehabilitate the market so that people can access the market. It's not only that agriculture production, but at the same time they have a bank and cellular company because it's an active zone for the military operations. So at least cash-based transfers program have created a space for those communities who have returned back so that they have access to the market, and then they have a financial systems on ground and a cellular company on ground. Thank you.
Just like one note, in terms of that learning platform, in order to make the learning platform work, we are increasing our investments in monitoring and evaluation, and particularly we refer to it as multi-tiered monitoring. So it would not just be one contract for third-party monitoring, but it might be several. You might have architecture engineering, then you might have monitoring that looks at performance benchmarks, and they're also looking at a variety of approaches for how do you monitor impacts on preventing violent extremism, which is quite complicated.
So we have one more question.
My name is Sabed Ali, Program Manager, Shawardu 3 program, come from Bangladesh. I am working with local partners, named MJSK, that means Mohidev Juva Samaj Kalyan Samiti, by the support of CARE Bangladesh and funded by USAID, Government of Bangladesh. My question is, Bangladesh is a disaster-prone country of the world. It is very much well known to all. Already 190 US dollar or million dollar are working for food for peace, food security at Bangladesh. You know that many Rohingya people comes from Myanmar at Bangladesh in Cox's Bazar and different places. Have you any opportunity to work more widely at Bangladesh to coverage the food security to the disparate peoples? This is my question.
Thank you for your question. What I heard was an inquiry as to increased opportunities to work with displaced populations in Bangladesh. And just to be a bit more precise, are you referring to the Rohingya people? Yeah. I don't have the figures in front of me, but USAID, certainly through the World Food Program, and some of our implementing partners are providing robust assistance to those that are displaced from Burma and now residing in the Cox's Bazar area, specifically the Rohingya people. And that support will continue. We've recently sent a fairly robust team to that area with with colleagues from the USAID mission in Dhaka to that region to look specifically at, in addition to the humanitarian assistance support that we're providing to the displaced, to look at ways in which we can also support the host communities in the areas around Cox's Bazar. I've yet to hear a specific readout of that particular trip. I know we have a session here, I believe it's tomorrow, on the Rohingya, which I very much look forward to hearing from those who are a bit more up to date than I am. But yes, we're committed to the displaced, supporting the displaced, and looking very seriously at how we might support the host communities in those areas. So thank you for the question.
So good morning, everybody. This is Shafiqur Rahman from USAID, Bangladesh. So I have just joined with USAID recently, but before that I worked for CARE for long 28 years. So I would like to respond some of the questions in response to the question of Sabed. USAID Bangladesh, USAID overall is supporting to Rohingya refugees. Already 63 million US dollar has been given, and working with WFP and UNICEF. And for the host community, currently the assessment at the Rohingya and the host communities are going on. And already it is announced that 185 million US dollar will be supported to support the host communities, not limiting to the two affected upazilas. It will cover the surrounding upazilas, sub-district as well. So this is for information to Sabed Ali's question. Thank you.
We have one more question right up here, so as you guys are thinking about that one.
Thank you. My name is Bakkala. I came
Can you speak a little bit closer? There.
My name is Bakkala. I came from South Sudan, Africa, and I work for Catholic Relief Services. Thank you, presenters, for your excellent presentation. Especially my question goes to Jerry. I think you gave us very detailed knowledge and experience you did, especially in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Just I want to learn, especially you didn't mention in detail about water component for peace, food for peace program. I think you mentioned about nutrition and the others. Of course, you mentioned little about water that helps. Just I want to learn the experience from Asia, how the water component scale, because for food for peace, USAID, if in general, of course, give funding through OFDA emergency for water, but in food for peace, generally it is limited. But the importance of water is a lot, that especially in nutrition, whatever. Just I want to experience the experience you have in water funding with peace funding and the plan in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Could you rephrase it again so I get a correct answer? It's scaling up of world food for peace?
No, I'm saying when you compare to like food for asset, I have experience of 17 years in food for peace program in Ethiopia and South Sudan. What I want to learn is, especially when you are struggling for funding for water component is not much. So what is the experience from Asia area, and also what is the plan of having water component with food for peace program?
Abdul, can we get a microphone over here? BK.
Pakistan is a disaster-prone country, by the way, and it's over 200 million population of country, okay? We have complex emergency, floods, drought, earthquake, tsunami, landslides, all sort of problems. You are talking about water and investment in the water sector. I think for us, the first priority was life-saving for that more than 5 million people or 2 million people which displaced in 2014. So we were giving life-saving assistance to save those lives, like 2 million people. After that, when they are going back, we did try to do this cash-based transfer program or food for asset programs, which I highlighted before. And then we have a community management of acute malnutrition program. That's the investment which Office of the Food for Peace or USAID in Pakistan is doing. With regards to your question about the water, look, you are expert. If people have displaced from an area for 7 years, and when they are going back, there is no irrigation channel, there is no water sources. So our investment is trying first to rehabilitate those water sources. And we are now working with FAO, with Government of Pakistan, with the Provincial Health Department, Provincial Agriculture Department and Irrigation Department, because irrigation, agriculture, food and health are now the provincial department's responsibilities or provincial government's responsibilities. So our investment for the longer term with USAID Pakistan, with other donors, with the Government of Pakistan is like for the rehabilitation of those water sources, and the shorter term or medium term investment is to make sure that people have food security programs and economic opportunities, so that when both are combined, then we can have a longer term sustainable development in the area. Thank you.
Pakistan is a water insecure country, and so our programs on the water sector really focus on pricing and policies. How do you put a price on water so it's used more effectively? In Pakistan, 90% of the water is used in the ag sector, and it's essentially free. So the water is used to flood fields inappropriately for your agricultural production. It's very difficult to put in place water policies like that to have a water pricing, but in terms of long term, unless you start to value water as essentially a scarce commodity, it won't be used efficiently. We also look at water use associations so that the farmers actually look at the cost for maintaining the irrigation canals in the system. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pipu Deng. I come from Myanmar and I work as a Deputy Head of Programs in Dan Church Norwegian Church Aid. And I would like to know about the World Food Program that Mr. Ade Abdul responded related to the displaced community, because DCA and CA Myanmar, we work in the southeastern part of the country. We also work with the displaced community in the country. And the particular thing I'm so much interested would be access to the market, because for the displaced community, when they come back to the country and the government, they allocated to the place where there is no proper market. And when you are implementing food security and also for the access to market, what are some of the key challenges when you do the access to market, and what are some of the interventions that you overcome those challenges?
As Jerry mentioned it in his keynote address, it's a volatile security condition in that area. Still, active military operation is going against the extremist and non-state actors in that area. So we are trying to somehow make sure that whosoever is going back, at least in that area, some kind of economic opportunity is there. So how we are making sure through WFP, as I mentioned, that for the international NGO community, still there are some challenges about getting the NOC, no objection certificate, from the government to operate in that area. Luckily, United Nations systems, including WFP, UNICEF, FAO, and UNDP have access in that area, and some national NGOs have access into that area. So our first priority is that when people are gone back, those displaced communities, at least they have food for next 6 months, like a monthly food ration, so that they are stabilized at home, not going the young people back to the extremist groups. That's number one. Second thing is that we are using cash, as explained earlier, as an instrument so that people have some kind of buying power, and that cash they can use in that area so that they have access in the market. Cellular companies are going back, and the financial systems are strengthening back in that area. So that we are trying that this TRICA could help to further scale up the markets. By the way, the military and other actors, including USAID, we have rehabilitated and reconstructed the infrastructure, market, school, health, hospitals, facilities, so that that infrastructure is there. And now we are making sure that those people can go back and restart services. And if you want further details, we can do a bilateral discussion. Okay, thank you.
Just to put some colorful context in it, in 2008, the FATA was called the most dangerous place on the planet Earth, and communities there, households, used to make a lot of money basically being guest houses for smugglers and violent extremist fighters who would pay $500 a week. So you're going from that situation to essentially rebuilding an area that was basically damaged heavily through fighting, and then you're trying to put in place legitimate enterprises such as livestock. And so the level of funding is quite different.
All right, we have one more.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Chip. I'm with Food for Peace in Nepal. There's been a lot of talk recently around the journey to self-reliance in Washington, and I'm wondering whether you can talk a little bit to us about Food for Peace's contribution to the journey to self-reliance. Thanks.
Hello, Chip. Welcome. Spoiler alert for Thursday with respect to our presentation around the USAID reorganization. That will include a sort of a broader discussion around the agency's newer, higher level priorities around what the administrator is calling the journey to self-reliance. And so guiding a good part of the reorganization and sort of mandates and vision of the component parts is the linkage to the notion of journey to self-reliance, of sort of USAID working itself out of a job and building capacities in the places where we work and with the people with whom we work to become more self-reliant. But we'll talk about that more specifically in Thursday's session, because it is influencing both the structure and the connective tissue across the different components, parts of the reorganization, as sort of a North Star guiding light, if you will, in terms of where we're going with our programming and priorities. So stand by.
All right, so one more really quick.
Hello, good morning. I'm Francine Jimenez from CARE Philippines. So a while ago, Jerry said in passing that private sector participation is critical or to your project. Can you expound further on how you were able to involve local markets in the project? Were there any failures or any best practices that you can share with us? Thank you.
One example there is that in Pakistan, the Ministry of Agriculture was the only organization allowed to grow and sell agricultural seed, which is not very efficient. So we helped pass a law called the Pakistan Seed Law, which said the private sector can now grow and sell seed. As a result, we've got a large number of private sector firms that are growing high-yield seeds and selling them in Pakistan, and it has significantly increased agricultural productivity, and particularly high-yield corn, hybrids corn, and other crops. So this is an example where the private sector was able to come in, produce high-yield seed, and then actually sell it to the farmers. And the farmers benefited, the private sector benefited, and it's a more sustainable approach than having a government institution responsible for growing and selling your agricultural seed. Thank you.
Just wait, there we go.
The use of private sectors like WFP and other partners have built the capacity of private sector to locally produce ready-to-use supplementary food for the malnourished mothers and kids under 5. And the idea was that let's start building the capacity of those local producers so that in the longer run, government of Pakistan can buy or they can sell it in the market, in an open market. So we are on that road, but it will take time. And recently, like in the last 3-4 years, when WFP and others have built that capacity, even that commodities were used in other parts of the world where there are emergencies, and they are equally internationally certified, like ready-to-use supplementary food and lipid-based nutrient supplements and high-energy biscuits. And now we are trying to negotiate better with WFP and UNICEF that they could produce further local ready-to-use therapeutic food, because as Jerry mentioned in his keynote address, 45% children are stunted in Pakistan, and it's a high volatile security situation. And then on top of that, further more disasters and drought is also in our hands now.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think the 3 gentlemen will be here for the rest of the day, so if you have any more questions, do stop them and ask them and talk to them. And like Brian was saying, he's also presenting at the plenary on Thursday for the USAID reorg, and that's going to be at 8:30 o'clock in the morning in this room.